The sun hangs low over the square, dust swirls in the heat. Crowd gathers silent at first, then murmuring, then pressing forward. At the center stands a wooden stake thick as a man's arm sharpened to a brutal point already stained dark from previous use. The executioner's hands are steady. He does not rush. This is not his first time. The condemned is dragged forward, stripped, trembling. The crowd does not look away. They cannot. This is a spectacle designed to be seen, to be remembered, to be feared. The stake is planted firmly in the ground. The victim is positioned, and then slowly, deliberately, the horror begins. This is impalement, one of the most calculated, merciless punishments ever devised by humankind. It was not meant to simply kill. It was meant to destroy the body, shatter the spirit, and send a message that would echo through generations. Why would anyone devise such a method? The answer lies not in madness, but in power. The practice stretches back thousands of years to the scorched plains of ancient Mesopotamia. The Assyrians, infamous for their brutality, were among the first to perfect it. They understood that empires were not built on mercy, they were built on fear. After conquering a city, Assyrian soldiers would line the roads with impaled bodies. Entire highways became corridors of the dead, a grotesque welcome to any who dared approach. The message was clear: this is what happens to those who resist. The Persians inherited this tradition and refined it under rulers like Darius I. Impalement became an art form when Babylonian rebels rose against his rule in 519 BC. Darius crushed them and then impaled 3,000 of their leaders, but the Persians introduced something even more chilling: the greased stake. By coating the wood in oil or fat, executioners could slide the pole through the body without tearing major arteries. The victim would not bleed out quickly. They would remain conscious, suspended between life and death for hours, sometimes days. Imagine the scene: dust rising in the wind, the sun beating down, the faint sound of screams carried across the desert. Bodies line the roads like grotesque signposts, reminding travelers that mercy had no place in the empire. And this was just the beginning. To understand the true horror of impalement, you must understand the method. There were two primary techniques: vertical and horizontal. Vertical impalement was the most common and the most agonizing. The stake itself was between 8 and 15 feet tall, thick enough to support a human body, sharpened at one end and often greased. The executioner would begin by inserting the point through the victim's lower body, through the backside or genitals, depending on the ruler's cruelty. The goal was not speed, it was suffering. Skilled executioners knew the human body intimately. They understood which organs could be pierced and which had to be avoided. They knew how to guide the stake upward through the intestines, past the stomach, between the lungs, threading through muscle and tissue without severing major blood vessels. The sound was unbearable: flesh tearing, wood sliding wetly through the body. The victim's first scream, raw, primal, echoing across the square. The stake was driven deeper. It would emerge from the shoulder, the neck, or in the worst cases, the mouth. The executioner would then hoist the victim upright, planting the stake in the ground, so the body hung suspended, impaled from below, fully visible to the crowd. The weight of the body did the rest. Gravity pulled downward, forcing the stake deeper with every breath, every twitch, every desperate attempt to move. This was not execution, this was theater. If impalement was a tool of terror, then Vlad III of Wallachia was its master craftsman. History knows him as Vlad Dracula. His enemies knew him as Vlad Vlad the Impaler. In the 15th century, Wallachia was a small principality caught between two empires: the Hungarian kingdom to the west and the Ottoman Empire to the south. Vlad ruled through violence, and he made no apologies for it. During his campaign against the Ottomans, Vlad impaled tens of thousands. Contemporary accounts describe forests of the impaled, entire roads lined with bodies on stakes stretching for miles. In 1462, when Ottoman Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror of Constantinople marched on Vlad's capital of Trovite, he was met with a sight that stopped his army in its tracks. 20,000 bodies, men, women, children, all impaled, arranged in concentric circles around the city, their corpses swaying in the wind. Birds circling overhead, the stench of death so thick it was suffocating. Mehmed, a man who had seen the horrors of war, reportedly turned his army back Was the number exaggerated perhaps, but the story endured because the psychological power of impalement was undeniable. Vlad earned his name, and with it, he earned immortality not as a hero, but as a symbol of calculated cruelty. Was he a monster or a tactician who understood that fear was the most effective weapon of all? Now, imagine you are the victim. The stake enters your body. The initial shock is overwhelming. Your mind cannot process the pain, but then it does, and the agony begins. The stake tears through your intestines, it punctures your lungs, it presses against your heart, but does not pierce it. Your body instinctively tries to pull away, but you cannot move. Every breath drives the stake deeper. Hours pass. Your throat is raw from screaming. You beg for water. You beg for mercy. You beg for a blade to end it faster. None comes. Your vision blurs. Your muscles stiffen. Shock sets in, but consciousness remains. You feel everything. Witnesses describe victims moaning, twitching, contorted in positions that defied anatomy. Some remained alive for days, their bodies slowly shutting down from blood loss, dehydration, and organ failure. The crowd watches. Children stare. Elders nod knowingly. Your face freezes in agony, a warning carved into flesh. By the 18th century, the practice of impalement began to fade. European legal systems, influenced by Enlightenment thought, shifted towards civilized forms of execution. Hanging, beheading, firing squads. Death was still public, but it was quicker, less theatrical. The Ottoman Empire was one of the last to abolish impalement, finally banning it in the 19th century under pressure from European diplomats who saw it as barbaric. But the legend lived on. Vlad's brutality was mythologized, exaggerated, and eventually fictionalized. Bram Stoker's Dracula immortalized the Impaler, transforming him from a historical warlord into a vampire, a creature that fed on blood and fear. The word impalement itself became shorthand for unthinkable cruelty, a relic of a darker age. The method disappeared, but the fear never did. Impalement wasn't just about death, it was about dominance, control, the erasure of dignity. It reminds us that human cruelty has no limit when power is unchecked, when rulers believe that terror is not just a tool, but a right. Even today, the image of a body on a stake evokes primal horror. We see echoes of it in authoritarian regimes that use public punishment to instill fear, in spectacles designed not to deliver justice, but to send a message. Impalement may be gone, but the impulse behind it, fear as a weapon, never left us. And perhaps that is the most chilling truth of all.